She was 8 months pregnant, bleeding to death on the kitchen floor, and her husband was 20 minutes away, proposing to another woman, not in London, not closing a billion-dollar deal. 20 minutes away. And here's the part that will make your blood run cold. He had planned this. The fake business trip, the switched-off phone, even the psychiatric ward he had reserved for her before she ever figured out the truth. Marcus Bennett did not just cheat on his pregnant wife. He built an entire machine designed to destroy her, take her daughter, and make the world believe she was insane. But he made one catastrophic mistake. He left her alive. What you are about to hear is not just a story of betrayal. It is a masterclass in how powerful men silence the women who threaten them, and exactly how one woman dismantled a billionaire's empire using nothing but evidence, patience, and the kind of strength that only comes from losing absolutely everything. Stay with me, because the twist at the 50-minute mark will leave you breathless. This story will teach you how to recognize gaslighting before it erases your reality, how the legal system can be weaponized against you, and more importantly, how to fight back when it is. If you have ever felt like the world was designed to make you doubt yourself, hit the like button right now. It tells me this story matters. Drop a comment. What is the one red flag you wish you had known sooner? And share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week's story hits even harder.
The 911 call came in crackling through the dispatch center at 11:47 on a Saturday night. A man's voice, shaking with a panic he could barely control, sliced through the noise. "My sister is 8 months pregnant, and there is blood all over the floor. Please, you need to send help right now." The dispatcher kept her voice steady and professional. "Sir, I need you to remain on the phone with me. What is your location?" 427 Whitmore Drive in Greenwich, Connecticut. It is the Bennett estate. Please, you have to hurry. She is not moving. Is she breathing? There was a pause, a muffled sound like an ear being pressed close to someone's mouth. Yes, just barely. But there is so much blood. Oh my God. There is just so much. Help is on the way, sir. Stay with her and try to keep her warm. The call disconnected, but the echo of that terrified voice would stay with everyone involved for many years. Because the woman bleeding to death on the perfect white marble floor of her dream house was about to learn that her entire life was nothing more than an elaborate lie. And her husband, the man who promised to love her and protect her until death do them part, was not in London closing some big business deal. He was 20 minutes away in the arms of another woman. Only 12 hours before, Rachel Bennett was the very image of happiness. At 32 years old, she had everything anyone could ever ask for. She had a breathtaking Connecticut mansion that was once featured in a design magazine, a husband with a net worth over $2 billion, and a baby girl expected in only 4 weeks. The nursery was already painted in gentle shades of pink and cream. Tiny outfits were folded neatly in drawers that cost more than the old car Rachel once drove. She used to drive it until Marcus insisted she get something safer for the baby. Now a new Tesla Model X sat untouched in the garage, while her beloved 10-year-old Honda Civic was donated to charity, without him even asking her. "It is just a car," Marcus had said when she seemed upset. "I am just trying to keep our family safe." That was Marcus, always protecting, always providing, and always thinking he knew best. Rachel was in the enormous living room of their house, placing white roses into crystal vases for the baby shower that was starting in a few hours. 30 of her closest friends and relatives would be there soon to celebrate the soon-to-arrive baby Emma. Well, they were mostly the wives of Marcus's friends. Rachel's own friends had gradually disappeared during her 3 years of marriage. Diane was the only one left, and even she had started to mention how Rachel just never seemed to have time anymore. The first contraction struck while Rachel was moving a small table for gifts. She gasped, and her hand shot to her swollen stomach, but she just laughed, just Braxton Hicks. She had been having false labor pains for weeks. Dr. Patterson had told her it was perfectly normal, especially with a first baby. The second one arrived 5 minutes later. This one was stronger. Rachel put down the vase she was holding and took a long, deep breath. She told herself she was just tired. She had been working all morning, insisting on doing the decorations herself instead of letting the caterers handle it, because she needed everything to be perfect. Of course, Marcus would have just hired someone to do everything. He had offered again and again, but Rachel insisted on doing it herself. It was one of the last things in her life that felt like it was truly hers. She took out her phone to send him a text, just to hear the sound of his voice, just to feel close to him even with thousands of miles between them. Hey honey, the shower is looking beautiful. Missing you. Call me when you get a chance. She watched the screen, waiting for those 3 little dots to appear, showing that he was typing back. Nothing. Marcus was in London, supposedly sealing a deal that would grow Bennett Technologies into Europe. He left 3 days ago, promising to call each night, but his phone had been going to voicemail for the last 48 hours. He is in critical negotiations, his assistant, Jennifer, had told her when Rachel had called the office. He asked not to be disturbed unless it was an emergency. The third contraction sent Rachel to her knees. This time, there was no mistaking it. The pain shot through her whole body like a bolt of lightning. It stole her breath, making it impossible to think. She grabbed the side of the gift table to hold herself up, and that is when she glanced down. A pool of blood was spreading across the white marble floor beneath her. So much blood. Rachel cried out for help. But the catering staff was in the kitchen, and the house was just too big for them to hear her. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her phone, her vision already starting to go blurry around the edges. She tried Marcus first. Voicemail. She tried Jennifer. No answer. Using the last bit of her strength, she called the one person she knew would drop everything, no matter what. Tyler, she whispered when her brother picked up. Something is wrong. The baby. There is so much blood. Rachel, where are you? Home, I am at home. Tyler, I think I am dying. The phone fell from her hand as another wave of pain washed over her. She could hear her brother's voice, small and far away, yelling her name just before everything faded to black. Tyler Morrison ignored every speed limit between Queens and Greenwich. He was a construction worker, not a billionaire. He drove an old pickup truck with spots of rust and a passenger door that would get stuck when it was cold. The Greenwich police had every reason to pull him over for flying at 90 miles per hour in a 55 zone. But one look at his face must have told them this was not a guy they should stop. Tyler had never trusted Marcus Bennett. From the first time his sister brought the tech billionaire home to meet their mom, something about the man had felt wrong. He was too smooth, too polished, too perfect. But Rachel was so happy, so in love, and so sure she had finally found her happily ever after. And Tyler had kept his opinions to himself, because that is what a good brother does. You support your sister's decisions, even if those decisions make your own skin crawl. He used the spare key Rachel gave him years ago, from back when she lived in a regular apartment in Brooklyn, long before Marcus had whisked her off to his glass palace in Connecticut. The front door opened, and Tyler's heart froze. Rachel was in a heap on the marble floor, surrounded by a spreading crimson pool. Her face was as white as a sheet. Her breathing was so faint he could barely see her chest rise and fall. Rich! Tyler fell to his knees next to her. His hands hovered over her, completely useless. He did not know where to press, did not know how to make the bleeding stop. He did not know anything except that his little sister was dying right in front of him. The paramedics showed up 7 minutes later, but it felt like a lifetime. They moved with practiced efficiency, getting Rachel onto a stretcher while shouting medical terms that Tyler could not understand. One of them asked about Rachel's medical history. Another asked about any allergies. A third one asked where her husband was. That one question landed like a punch to the gut. Where was Marcus? As the ambulance raced toward Greenwich Hospital, Tyler tried Marcus's cell phone again. Voicemail. He tried Jennifer. Voicemail. He tried the main number for Bennett Technologies and hit a recording that said the office was closed for the weekend. His sister was bleeding to death in an ambulance, and her billionaire husband was totally out of reach. Something was terribly wrong. Dr. Patricia Williams had been a surgeon for 23 years, and she had learned a long time ago how to deliver bad news with compassion, but never with false hope. She found Tyler in the waiting area, still in his sawdust-covered work clothes, his hands still marked with his sister's blood. "Mr. Morrison," she began. "I'm Dr. Williams," she said, sitting next to him. "I've been caring for your sister." Tyler shot up from his chair. "Is she okay? Is the baby all right?" Dr. Williams guided him back to his seat. Her eyes were compassionate yet grave. "Your sister had a severe placental abruption. The placenta detached from the uterus before the birth, causing major internal bleeding." The room seemed to spin around Tyler. "What does that mean for her?" "It means we have to do an emergency C-section right now. The baby is in distress, and Rachel is losing blood too quickly." The doctor paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I won't sugarcoat this. It's a critical situation for both of them." "But you can save them, can't you? You can save them both." "We're going to do everything possible, but I need you to sign these consent forms. You're Rachel's emergency contact." Tyler just stared at her. "I'm her emergency contact? What about her husband?" A subtle hint of disapproval crossed the doctor's face. "According to her file, you are the main contact. We haven't been able to get a hold of Mr. Bennett." Tyler's hands trembled as he signed the papers. As they wheeled Rachel into the operating room, he collapsed into a chair and looked at his phone. He dialed Marcus again. It went straight to voicemail. A knot formed in his stomach. Marcus Bennett was a lot of things, and not many of them were good, but he was never out of touch. His whole business was built on being available 24/7. The idea that he'd be unreachable during a real family crisis seemed impossible, unless he wasn't where he said he was. Tyler opened the location-sharing app. Rachel had made them all install years ago, back when their mom was alive and always worried about them. Rachel's location pin was right here at the hospital. Tyler's pin was in the same spot, but Marcus's pin showed he was in Stamford, Connecticut. Not London. Not on a plane over the ocean. Stamford, a 20-minute drive away. Tyler stared at the map, his mind struggling to make sense of it. It had to be a mistake. Maybe he landed at a private airfield. Maybe his phone was pinging the wrong cell tower. There had to be a reasonable explanation. But Tyler had been a soldier before he started working in construction. He'd learned to trust his gut, and his gut was screaming that Marcus Bennett was right where the app said, doing something he shouldn't be while his wife's life was on the line. Tyler took a screenshot of the location and saved it. Then he prepared for a long wait. The surgery lasted 5 hours. He paced the waiting room like a man trapped in a cage. He chugged coffee from a vending machine that tasted like acid. He sent calls from worried family members to voicemail. Finally, at 2:17 in the morning, Dr. Williams appeared. Her scrubs were stained, but she had a smile on her face. "She pulled through," the doctor said. It was incredibly close, but your sister is a real fighter." Tyler felt hot tears roll down his cheeks before he even knew he was crying. And the baby? Your niece is tiny but tough. 4 pounds, 2 ounces. She'll need to be in the neonatal intensive care unit for a few weeks, but her vital signs look good. She's a fighter, just like her mom. Can I see them? Rachel is still unconscious, but you can see the baby. Tyler walked with Dr. Williams through a maze of hallways to the NICU. Through the glass, he saw rows of incubators, each holding a tiny person hooked up to machines. Dr. Williams pointed to one. That's Emma. Tyler put his hand on the glass. The baby was so small, her skin looked almost see-through. Her little chest rose and fell with every tiny breath. She had a full head of dark hair, just like Rachel's. Your mom's going to be all right, little one, Tyler whispered. And I'm going to make sure your dad gets here, even if I have to drag him. But first, he had to figure out where Marcus Bennett really was. Diane Torres showed up at the hospital at 3 in the morning, wearing a coat over her pajamas. Tyler, what on earth happened? She asked, rushing over with wide, fearful eyes. I saw Rachel's text that the shower was off, and then I heard nothing. I've been calling her for hours. She collapsed. It was a placental abruption. They had to do an emergency C-section. Oh my God, Diane gasped, sinking into a nearby chair. Is she okay? What about the baby? They're both going to be okay. But Diane, I have to show you something. Tyler took out his phone and showed her the screenshot of Marcus's location. Diane looked at the screen for a long time. That's not London. No, it's not. Where is it? Stamford. Some apartment building off exit 5. Diane's face grew stern. That son of a bitch? I don't want to jump to conclusions, Tyler said, though he already had. Maybe there's a good reason. Tyler, the only reason for a married man to be in a Stamford apartment instead of London, while his wife is nearly dying, is the one we're both thinking of. He knew she was right. He had known it from the moment he saw the location pin. But he needed evidence. Rachel deserved evidence. I know a guy, Diane said after a moment. A private investigator. He's not cheap, but he's the best. He found all of my ex-husband's secret bank accounts. How expensive is he? Expensive enough that a guy from Queens who works construction probably can't afford him. But then Diane pulled out her phone. Luckily for you, a paralegal who has a serious problem with cheating husbands knows how to work out a deal. Marcus Bennett strolled into the hospital at 9:15 the next morning, looking like the perfect concerned husband. He carried a huge bouquet of white roses and wore an expression of deep worry. His suit was flawless, his hair was perfect, and his shoes likely cost more than Tyler's rent. Rachel, my love, Marcus said, gliding into the room as if he owned it, which Tyler thought he might, considering the Bennett name was on the new children's wing. I came as soon as I heard. Rachel was awake, looking pale and exhausted, but she was alert. She had been asking for Marcus since she woke up, certain he was sick with worry. Tyler saw his sister's face brighten at the sight of her husband, and he felt his heart break. Marcus, Rachel whispered, you're here. Of course I'm here, Marcus said, kissing her forehead and placing a hand on her cheek. I got on the first flight out of London the second Jennifer told me. The satellite phone service was down during my meetings, so I had no clue anything was wrong. The lie was so polished, so natural, so perfectly delivered. If Tyler hadn't seen the location data himself, he might have actually bought it. Have you seen Emma? Rachel asked. Not yet. I had to see you first. How are you feeling? Tyler quietly left the room. He couldn't watch Marcus play the role of the devoted husband for one more minute. Out in the hall, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Diane. My guy can see us tomorrow. He says he can find out exactly where Marcus was and who he was with. But Tyler, are you positive you want to do this? Once Rachel finds out, you can't take it back. Tyler looked through the window at his sister, who was smiling weakly at the man who had left her to nearly die alone. He typed his reply with steady hands. Do it. She deserves the truth. Carl Mendez did not look like a private investigator. He wore faded jeans and a Yankees sweatshirt and was sipping a coffee from a corner store. He could have been any regular guy passing time in a diner. But his eyes were different. They were sharp and quick, always scanning the room, the eyes of a man who'd spent his life studying people. So, Carl said, sliding into the booth with Tyler and Diane, you think your brother-in-law is cheating on your sister while she's in the hospital with their premature baby? Tyler gave a grim nod. I know how that sounds. It sounds like almost every case I've had for the past 30 years, Carl said with a shrug. Rich men cheating on their wives isn't new. The only question is how careless he's being. He was at an apartment in Stamford the night she almost died, Diane added. His phone's location data proved it. Carl's eyebrow went up. You have location data? Carl pulled out a worn-down notebook. Tell me everything you know about the husband, his name, business, routine, anyone he might be sleeping with. For the next hour, Tyler and Diane explained everything about Marcus Bennett. They talked about his company, Bennett Technologies, his obsessive work schedule, and his business trips that became more frequent. They mentioned the young woman he hired 18 months ago to head strategic development, Victoria Chase. She is 27, looks like a supermodel, Diane said, and Marcus acts like she created the internet. Carl wrote her name down. How does your sister feel about Victoria? Tyler recalled the few times Rachel brought her up. She said Marcus thinks Victoria is brilliant, with a vision most people can't grasp. Carl scoffed. Oh, I'm sure she has vision. A vision that's probably 6 feet tall. And has legs for days, he added, closing his notebook. Give me 1 week. I'll find out exactly what your friend Marcus has been doing. 3 days later, Carl called with an update. Your brother-in-law hasn't been to London in 6 months, Carl stated. His private jet, tail number November 787, Romeo Mike, was scheduled for Heathrow last week, but the flight plan was changed twice. So where did he go? Tyler asked. First to Los Angeles, then to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. He landed there the same night your sister collapsed. Tyler could feel his blood pressure rising. Mexico? It gets worse, Carl said. Immigration records confirmed 2 passengers on that plane, Marcus Bennett and Victoria Chase. They checked into a resort called Casa del Mar in the presidential suite for 4 nights. Tyler shut his eyes. He knew something like this was happening, but hearing it out loud felt like getting punched in the stomach. There's more, Carl went on. I have a guy in Cabo. He's a photographer who works for the celebrity magazines. He got photos. What kind of photos? Tyler asked, dreading the answer. The kind that will make your sister's divorce attorney very, very happy. Tyler looked at the pictures spread out on Carl's desk. There were Marcus and Victoria, holding hands on a secluded beach. Victoria was feeding Marcus strawberries during a dinner by candlelight. Marcus was kissing Victoria's neck as she laughed, her head tilted back in pure happiness. But the worst picture was from the resort spa. Marcus's wedding band was sitting on a table next to a massage bed, and on Victoria's left hand, a massive engagement ring sparkled in the Mexican sun. That ring is enormous, Tyler said, zooming in on the picture. At least 5 carats, Carl agreed. Custom design. I had a jeweler I know look at it. He figures it cost well over $200,000. Rachel's engagement ring was lovely, but it was nothing like this. Marcus had always talked a big game about how he was going to upgrade her ring one day, once the company was more secure. It looked like he had finally upgraded, just not for Rachel. When did he propose to Rachel? Carl asked. 2.5 years ago. Well, Carl said, He asked Victoria to marry him 3 weeks ago during a private dinner in Malibu. I have the receipt from the restaurant. He bought a $9,000 bottle of champagne. Tyler felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a simple affair. It was a completely separate life. Marcus was planning a future with another woman while his pregnant wife was at home, believing all of his lies. She has to know, Tyler said firmly. Carl nodded. She does. But here's the problem with breaking news like this. It's all about timing. Your sister just had a major operation. Her baby is in intensive care. If you tell her this now, it could absolutely crush her. And if I don't, Tyler added, Marcus gets more time to hide his tracks. Exactly, Carl said, leaning back. So now you have a choice. What's more important, justice or your sister's well-being? It felt like an impossible choice. And Tyler had no idea what to do. But in the end, Rachel made the decision for him. When Tyler walked into her hospital room that afternoon, Rachel was sitting up in bed. Something about her was different. The color was back in her face, and her eyes had a clarity Tyler hadn't seen in a very long time. I need to talk to you, Rachel said. Close the door. Tyler did what she asked, his heart pounding in his chest. I've been thinking, Rachel began, about the night I collapsed, about Marcus being impossible to reach, about how he just happened to be on the first flight back from London as soon as he heard. Rach, maybe you should just get some rest. I'm finished resting. Rachel's voice was firm. I've been stuck in this bed for 3 days with nothing else to do but think, and none of it makes sense. What do you mean? Tyler asked. Marcus said he was in critical meetings, that the satellite phones weren't working. He said he came right here from the airport. Rachel just shook her head. Tyler, I know my husband. When he gets off a long flight, he's a wreck. His clothes are a mess, and he has that awful, stale airplane smell. But when he got here, he was immaculate. Fresh suit, perfect hair, like he had just gotten out of the shower. Rachel's eyes locked with Tyler's. He wasn't in London, was he? Tyler paused for a second before he took out his phone. He showed her the location data, and then the pictures. As Rachel looked at each photo, her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to a deep, empty shock that was far worse than any scream. That can't be right, she whispered, her eyes fixed on the image of Marcus kissing Victoria on the beach. He was in London. There must be some other explanation. Rach, the flight records don't lie, Tyler said gently. Rachel kept swiping through the pictures. When she got to the one of Victoria's engagement ring, her hand immediately went to her own wedding ring, a beautiful 3-carat diamond that had felt huge 3 years ago. Next to Victoria's ring, it looked almost tiny. He proposed to her, Rachel said, her voice completely flat. While I was at home, pregnant with his child, he was proposing to another woman. 3 weeks ago, in Malibu, Tyler added softly. Rachel was silent for a long time. Then she closed the phone and gave it back to Tyler. I want to see Emma, she stated. Rach, we need to discuss this. We need to get a lawyer. I need to see my daughter, she repeated. Tyler helped Rachel into a wheelchair. He recognized that tone in her voice. It was the same quiet determination she had after their father left when they were just kids, when she decided to work her way through college as a waitress, and when she built her own career from scratch before Marcus persuaded her to quit. The Rachel Morrison, from before she was Rachel Bennett, had always been a fighter. Tyler was starting to see that woman emerge again. In the neonatal intensive care unit, Rachel laid her hands on Emma's incubator and started to cry. But these weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of pure anger. He knew, she said quietly. 2 days before I collapsed, I called him. I told him I wasn't feeling well. He knew. He was already planning to go to Mexico with her. He kissed me goodbye that morning, Tyler. He told me that he loved me, and the entire time, he was planning to propose to someone else. Tyler saw his sister's face harden. The innocent woman who had trusted her husband completely was vanishing, and in her place was someone stronger, someone with a purpose. "How long do you think this has been going on?" Rachel asked. "Carl is still looking into it, but from the flight logs, they've gone on at least 6 trips together this past year. It was always when Marcus claimed he was away on business." Rachel stood silently for a few minutes, her hand resting on the warm plastic of the incubator. When she finally spoke, her voice was strong. "I want to know everything, every single trip. Every lie, every cent he spent on her. I want the receipts, the pictures, the bank statements, everything." "Rach, maybe you should just try to get better first. This can all wait." "No, it can't." Rachel turned to him, and Tyler saw a steely resolve in her eyes he had never seen before. "Because he's going to show up here, eventually, and he's going to have an excuse for everything. He's going to try to make me feel like I'm crazy for ever doubting him. He'll twist this all around until somehow it's my fault." Tyler knew she was right. Marcus was a master at manipulation, at making people doubt what they knew to be true. "But if I have proof," Rachel went on, "if I have evidence that he can't talk his way out of, then I have the power. For the first time in 3 years, I will have the power." "What are you going to do?" Rachel looked back at Emma, who was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the machines that were keeping her alive. "I'm going to protect my daughter, and I'm going to make sure Marcus Bennett pays for every single lie." 2 weeks later, Rachel was finally released from the hospital. Emma still had to be in the neonatal unit for a few more weeks, but Rachel was well enough to leave. She didn't move back into their mansion. Instead, she got a hotel room close to the hospital, telling everyone she just wanted to be near Emma. The real reason was much simpler and much more painful. She couldn't stand the idea of being in the house where she had collapsed, where every single room was a reminder of a life that had turned out to be a complete lie. Diane helped her get settled, bringing food, wine, and the kind of tough love friendship that Rachel desperately needed. "All right, so what's the game plan?" Diane asked, pouring them both a large glass of Pinot Noir. "First, I need a lawyer, a great one, someone who handles high-stakes divorces and isn't scared of taking on a billionaire." Diane broke into a huge grin. "Girl, I have been waiting 3 years for you to say those words." Helena Cross was exactly the person Rachel needed, and then some. At 48, she had made a name for herself as Manhattan's go-to divorce lawyer by never flinching from powerful men or their high-priced legal teams. Her office was a gallery of framed articles about her victories, each one showing some wealthy husband who made the mistake of underestimating her. "Your case is a complete mess," Helena told Rachel plainly in her midtown office, "but it is a mess with possibilities." "What do you mean by that?" "The good part is, the affair gives us an edge, especially since he abandoned you during a health crisis. The bad part is, you signed a prenuptial agreement that is basically ironclad in a normal situation." Rachel's spirits plummeted. The prenup was the one thing Marcus insisted on for the wedding. She had signed it without even reading it, too blinded by love to think she would ever need it. "What makes a situation not normal?" "If we can show that you were tricked into the marriage," Helena said, "or if we can prove Marcus was already up to no good when you signed the papers, we might get the whole thing thrown out. The private investigator has records of Marcus's trips with Victoria going back 18 months. That's before Emma was even conceived." A glint appeared in Helena's eyes. "That helps, but we need more. We need financial documents that show he was lying, proof of hidden money, something that proves Marcus was planning to leave you while hiding the family's real wealth. How do we get that?" Helena smiled. and it looked like a predator's grin. We let him think he has already won. Then we just watch him get sloppy. The strategy Helena described was risky, but brilliant. Rachel would have to act like the beaten wife, thankful for any scraps Marcus decided to offer. She would focus on Emma's health instead of arguing over money. In the meantime, Helena's people would perform a deep dive into the finances of Bennett Technologies. Carl would keep digging into Victoria's past, and Rachel was to find any evidence she could from inside their home. The whole point is to make them think you are not a danger, Helena said. Rich guys like Marcus figure women like you will just take what is offered instead of fighting back and risking it all. We are going to use his arrogance against him. What if he is right? What if I fight and end up with nothing? Helena leaned in. Then you lose with your head held high, and your daughter will always know her mother had the courage to fight for her. Rachel thought of Emma, so tiny and weak in her incubator. She thought of the secure, stable life she wanted to give her daughter, a mother who refused to be a pushover. When do we get started? Helena smiled. We already have. That night, Rachel went back to the Greenwich estate for the first time after her collapse. Marcus was in the living room, with champagne chilling on ice. His smile was warm, the perfect image of a husband who was thrilled to have his wife back. I thought we could have a celebration, he said, pouring 2 glasses. Emma is getting better, and you are finally out of the hospital. This is very thoughtful. Rachel took the glass, but didn't take a sip. She had learned long ago that Marcus's grand gestures always came when he was feeling guilty. I have been thinking about what is next for us, Marcus said. About the kind of life we want to create for Emma. Rachel put on a hopeful expression. Oh, I realize my work travel has been hard on our marriage. So I have been thinking about changing my duties at the company. I want to promote Victoria to Chief Operating Officer. She is already handling most of the daily work anyway, and she is incredibly talented. It would give me more time to be here with you and Emma. Rachel's stomach twisted into a knot. Marcus was basically promoting his mistress and framing it as a sacrifice for his family. That sounds like a lot of responsibility for someone so young, Rachel said, choosing her words with care. Age does not matter when you have a vision. Victoria can see the future of technology in a way that most people just do not get. I am sure she does. Marcus was oblivious to the sarcasm. Actually, I was hoping you would want to meet her. She has been asking about you, worried about your condition. The nerve was incredible, but Rachel just smiled and nodded, playing her part. Maybe once I am feeling a bit stronger, she suggested. Of course, there is no rush. Then Marcus's phone buzzed. Phone. He glanced at it with a look Rachel knew all too well, that eager smile, that secret excitement. I should get this. It is a work emergency. He went out onto the terrace, and through the glass, Rachel could hear bits of their talk. It was not business. It was quiet laughter and whispered affection. When he came back inside, his face was carefully blank. Sorry about that. Crisis managed. Rachel made her excuses and went to bed early, saying she was tired, but she lay awake for hours, hearing the muffled sound of Marcus's voice as he talked with Victoria. The war was on, and Rachel was finally prepared to fight. 3 weeks after getting out of the hospital, Rachel got the call she had been praying for. Helena called at 7 in the morning, her usually calm voice electric with excitement. We got them, Helena said. Bennett Technologies has been laundering money through offshore accounts for the last 2 years. Shell companies, secret assets, tax dodges that are almost certainly fraud. Rachel's heart hammered in her chest. How much money? A conservative guess is $50 million. That should have been part of your marital property. With this proof, we can tear up the prenup and demand half of everything, the hidden accounts included. So, I can secure Emma's future better than that. You can make certain that Marcus faces serious punishment for his actions. Rachel was dizzy with relief. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, she could see a way out, a way to support her daughter, without being tied to a man who had betrayed her so completely. What happens now? I am filing court papers this afternoon, an emergency order to freeze all of Bennett Technologies' assets while we investigate. By tomorrow morning, Marcus will not be able to touch a single dime without a judge's permission. That evening, Rachel finally let herself celebrate. Diane showed up with champagne, and Tyler brought pizza. Emma was improving so much she could be moved out of the intensive care unit next week. Everything was finally falling into place. "Here's to karma finally doing its job," Diane said, lifting her glass. "To my sister," Tyler chimed in, "who is about to take that snake for all he is worth." Rachel smiled. A real smile of happiness for the first time in months. To Emma, to our new start. They ate and laughed, and for a few wonderful hours, Rachel pushed aside the hurt and the fear of the last few weeks. She checked on Emma through the video feed. Her daughter was sleeping soundly, gaining weight, getting stronger. Everything was going to be fine. The next morning, Rachel was woken by a phone call that destroyed her world. "Mrs. Bennett?" It was Jennifer, Marcus's assistant. Her voice was unusually stiff. "Mr. Bennett needs you to come to the house right away. There are some papers that you need to sign." "What kind of papers?" "I'm not allowed to say, but it is an emergency." A chill ran down Rachel's spine. Something was off. Marcus never needed her to sign things urgently. He had a whole team for that. "I will be there in 1 hour," she said. She tried calling Helena on the drive to Greenwich, but it went straight to her voicemail. She tried Diane, voicemail, Tyler, voicemail. By the time she pulled into the driveway, Rachel's hands were shaking. Marcus was waiting in the living room. He was not alone. An unfamiliar woman sat next to him on the white sofa. She was older, sophisticated, and had a look that screamed expensive lawyers and even more expensive battles. And behind them stood a man wearing a police uniform. "Rachel," Marcus said, his voice soaked in fake concern. "Please sit. We need to talk." "What is happening? Who are these people?" Marcus introduced the woman as Margaret Ellis, a court-appointed supervisor. "A supervisor for what?" Marcus let out a long, theatrical sigh, his regret perfectly rehearsed. "Rachel, I truly hoped it would not lead to this. But I have been told your behavior lately is a danger to Emma's safety." Rachel felt the world crumble beneath her feet. "My behavior? The wild accusations, the private detectives you hired, the insane idea that I was cheating instead of working abroad?" Marcus shook his head mournfully. "Dr. Patterson mentioned concerns about postpartum psychosis." "I do not have that," she snapped. "Denial is often a symptom," Margaret stated coolly. "That, along with paranoia, obsessive tendencies, and a blurred line between what is real and what is not." A chill went down Rachel's spine. "This cannot be real. This is not happening. What are you talking about?" An officer took a small step forward. He looked deeply uncomfortable with his part in this charade. "Mrs. Bennett, the court has granted a temporary order. It limits your contact with your daughter until you complete a psychiatric evaluation." "Limit my contact? That is my baby. She will be safe with your husband while you will get the treatment you need," Margaret said. Marcus moved toward Rachel, his arms open. "Honey, I know this is overwhelming, but we are all just trying to do what is best for Emma. That includes you getting well." Rachel recoiled from his touch. "Do not you dare touch me. You see?" Margaret scribbled on her clipboard. "Paranoid reactions to loved ones. It is a classic sign. I am not paranoid. I have proof he was with another woman." "What proof?" Marcus asked, his voice a mask of calm reason. "Proof that I was meeting a colleague at her apartment? Proof that I had a work dinner while I was out of town?" Rachel, a mind under stress, can make innocent things seem sinister. The pictures, the airline tickets, the diamond ring. Marcus held his hands up in surrender. What pictures? What tickets? Sweetheart, I was in London. The entire executive board can confirm that. And a ring? Marcus showed her his left hand, the gold wedding band shining under the light. I am already married to the woman I love. Rachel stared, her thoughts spinning. The proof. Helena had it. Carl had the pictures. I need to get my lawyer on the phone, Rachel demanded. I am sorry, but that is not an option right now, Margaret cut in. The evaluation requires you to have very little contact with outside parties. They could fuel your delusions. This is crazy. You can't do this. The officer shifted his weight. Ma'am, I have a signed court order. I have to take you to the Pinehurst Wellness Center for a 72-hour hold. We can make this easy, or we can make it difficult. Rachel's eyes darted between them. Marcus looked heartbroken. Margaret was cold and professional, and the officer seemed sorry but resolute. She had been completely and utterly trapped. Let me grab my purse, Rachel said softly. Let me just say goodbye to my baby. I cannot allow that, Margaret replied. Any interaction with Emma could be a trigger for you right now. In that moment, Rachel saw the entire, horrifying picture. Marcus was not just trying to win in a divorce, he was trying to get her declared mentally unfit. He wanted to take full custody of Emma and remove Rachel from her daughter's world for good, and she had walked straight into his snare. Pinehurst was a mental health facility for rich families who preferred to keep their problems private. The grounds were perfect, and the private rooms felt more like luxury hotel suites than a hospital. The staff all spoke in calm, gentle voices and never stopped smiling. But it was a prison all the same. Rachel spent the first 24 hours in a daze. They confiscated her phone and took her clothes, giving her a set of plain gray sweats to wear. They took her jewelry, even her wedding band. A psychiatrist named Dr. Morris spoke with her on day 2. Mrs. Bennett, he began gently, can you explain to me why you believe you are here? My husband is trying to take my daughter from me, and it looks like my own lawyer betrayed me. Dr. Morris jotted something down. Your husband told me you have been having paranoid fantasies, that you thought he was having an affair when he was simply traveling for his job. I have pictures. You do? Dr. Morris's voice was kind but filled with doubt. Do you have them with you? Can you let me see them? Rachel's throat felt tight. No. They took my phone when I arrived. I see. And what do these pictures show? My husband. In Mexico. With another woman. A woman he has been seeing for more than a year. Dr. Morris nodded. Mrs. Bennett, I have reviewed the information from your husband. He gave me flight records proving he was in London on those exact dates. He also provided statements from his co-workers who were with him in meetings. He even has documents showing that the woman you think is his mistress was actually in Singapore at the same time. That is impossible. Or, he suggested, is it possible that the stress from your difficult pregnancy, plus the trauma of almost dying, has warped your view of reality? Rachel just looked at him. He was not being malicious. He actually believed every word he was saying. That meant Marcus had created fake evidence, real-looking documents, paid-off witnesses, and anything else he needed to turn Rachel's reality into a delusion. She was no longer fighting a man who cheated. She was fighting an entire system built to protect powerful men like him. And that system had just swallowed her whole. On her third day, a visitor arrived. Rachel was in the common area, staring blankly at a television when a nurse approached her. Mrs. Bennett, your mother-in-law is here. Rachel did not have a mother-in-law. Marcus's mother passed away when he was 12. She walked toward the visiting area, her legs numb, wondering what new horror was about to unfold. The woman at the table was a complete stranger. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and a graceful posture that suggested a life of privilege. "Rachel," the woman said, motioning to the empty chair. "Please have a seat. We don't have long. Who are you?" "My name is Evelyn Grant. I was once Victoria Chase's mother-in-law." Rachel sank into the chair. "Victoria was my son Robert's wife for 3 years." Evelyn's voice was tense with barely contained rage. "She left with $4 million of his money and nearly ruined our family's name. I do not get it. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I have been following the news. I saw the pattern. The wife suddenly committed to a psychiatric facility, the husband telling everyone he just wants to help her." Evelyn leaned in closer. "It is the same strategy she used on my son Robert. Victoria has done this to other people. Victoria Chase is a fake name. Her real name is Amber Jenkins. She is a professional who I know has gone after at least 3 other wealthy men. She gets them to trust her, convinces them to leave their families, and then vanishes with as much money as she can get." The room felt like it was spinning. "But Marcus isn't a victim. He cheated on me." "Of course he did. But he is also being manipulated," Evelyn said grimly. "Amber does not just go after the husbands. She researches the whole family. She looks for men who are already miserable, searching for a way out. Then she becomes their excuse while making sure she gets a huge payday." "Why are you here?" "Because by the time Robert understood what was happening, it was over. He had already divorced his wife, pushed his children away, and given Amber access to accounts that should have been secure." Evelyn's gaze was like steel. "I refuse to watch another family get torn apart like mine was." She pushed a business card toward Rachel. "This is a lawyer, a real one. He cannot be bought off with your husband's money. Call him as soon as you are out. And Rachel," Evelyn said as she stood, "do not let them make you think you are going crazy. The scariest thing about gaslighting is that it works." Rachel was discharged from Pinehurst after the required 72-hour observation. The final report said that while she was under extreme stress, there was no sign of psychosis or any issue that made her an unfit mother. But when she went to Greenwich Hospital to see Emma, a security guard stopped her at the neonatal intensive care unit. "I am sorry, Mrs. Bennett." The guard looked ashamed. "The court has restricted your visitation rights until a formal review." "Restricted? She is my daughter." "I understand, ma'am, but the order is clear. You are allowed supervised visits once per week, for 1 hour." Through the glass doors, Rachel could see into the unit, and there, next to Emma's incubator, was Marcus. He was holding their baby girl, smiling down at her, putting on a show for anyone who might be watching. Rachel slammed her fists on the glass, shouting his name as security pulled her away from the building. Diane was parked out front, tears covering her face. "Rach, I am so sorry. I tried to reach you. I went to that place, but they refused to let me see you. What happened with Helena? Where is all our proof? It is gone." "All of it," Diane sobbed. "Helena's law firm called. They said they could not represent you anymore. Carl said his office was broken into and everything was stolen. Every picture, every file, all of it. That is not possible. Marcus has connections we can't even comprehend. He had 3 days while they had you locked away. 3 days to pay off anyone helping you and to erase every piece of evidence we found." Rachel fell onto a bench outside the hospital, her legs too weak to hold her. She had no lawyer, no proof, no money, and worst of all, she had no access to her baby girl. Marcus had won. "What am I going to do?" Rachel whispered. Diane sat beside her and grabbed her hand. "You are going to fight," Diane said without a hint of doubt. "I do not know how right now, but you are the toughest person I know, and you are not letting that man take your daughter." But first, Rachel had to find a place to sleep. Her accounts were frozen, she was locked out of the mansion, and every one of her credit cards was declined. She was married to a billionaire, yet she could not even afford a cheap motel room. "You are staying with me," Diane declared. "My couch is not much, but it is yours for however long you need." That night, lying on Diane's old sofa in her tiny apartment in Queens, Rachel stared at the ceiling, trying to understand how her life had crumbled. She had $47 to her name, a daughter she wasn't allowed to see, and a husband who had made the world think she was insane. She had absolutely nothing left to lose, and, as she was about to find out, that made her far more dangerous than Marcus could ever have guessed. Rachel spent the next 2 weeks in a haze of misery. She pumped milk for a daughter she couldn't give it to. She applied for jobs that rejected her because her name was tied to a messy public divorce. She called one lawyer after another, but they all refused her case as soon as they heard the name Marcus Bennett. The system was built to break people like her, and it was working perfectly. Then, on a gloomy Tuesday morning, everything changed. Diane was at work, and Rachel was alone in the apartment, scrolling through job ads she knew were a dead end, when a knock came at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Rachel no longer expected anyone at the door. Through the peephole, she saw a woman she knew. Victoria Chase. Her hand trembled on the doorknob as every instinct told her not to open it. This was the woman who had wrecked her marriage, who was probably in Rachel's house at this very moment, sleeping in her bed and acting like a mother to her child. But curiosity was stronger. Rachel opened the door. Victoria appeared different from the photos Carl had shown her. She was thinner, paler, with dark rings under her eyes that no amount of concealer could cover. She seemed like a person who had not slept for weeks. "I need to speak with you," Victoria said. "Can I come inside?" "Why would I ever let you in my home?" "Because I can help you retrieve Emma." Rachel stared at her for a very long moment. Then she moved aside. Victoria sat on Diane's couch, her hands clasped around a glass of water she did not drink. "My actual name is Amber Jenkins," she stated. "I am a professional con artist. I have been using this specific scam for 8 years. Rachel's jaw grew tense. "You ruin families just for money. I select men who are already on the verge of destroying their own families. I simply speed up the inevitable and ensure I get paid." Amber's voice was flat, without any feeling. "This is not a justification, just a statement of fact." "Then why are you here?" "Because Marcus is nothing like the others." "What do you mean?" Amber finally looked at her. "The men I dealt with before were weak, vain, and easy to manipulate. They cheated on their wives to feel strong. They left for younger women. They were pathetic, but they were never a threat." "And Marcus? Marcus is a monster." Amber's voice finally broke. "I thought I was the one playing him, but he has been controlling me from the start." Rachel felt something change inside her. It was not exactly sympathy, but it was a sense of connection. She understood what it was like to believe you had power, only to find out you were just a pawn in someone else's strategy. "What did he do?" "He put his hands on my throat last week," Amber said in a low voice. "He told me that if I ever considered leaving, he would destroy me in the same way he destroyed you. I believed him because I have witnessed what he is capable of." "Why would he threaten you? I heard you were getting married." Amber gave a bitter laugh. "There was not ever going to be a wedding. Marcus does not want a partner. He wants property. I was useful to him when he was getting rid of you. Now that you are no longer in the picture, I am just another problem." Rachel considered this new information carefully. "So you are not here because you feel guilty. You are here for my assistance. I am here because we require each other's help." Amber produced a flash drive. "I have recorded every single conversation Marcus and I have had for the past 6 months. It was my insurance policy in case things went wrong. And Rachel, they have gone terribly wrong." What is on that drive? Everything. Marcus confessing he faked your psychiatric evaluations. Marcus and his mother scheming about how to frame you for fraud. Marcus talking about how to keep Emma from you forever. Amber set the drive on the coffee table that separated them. It is more than enough to ruin him if we use it correctly. Rachel listened to the recordings while her heart beat so hard she felt it might explode. Marcus's voice was cold and methodical, speaking of Rachel as if she were a problem to be solved instead of a person he had once loved. The postpartum psychosis story is perfect, Marcus said on one of the tracks. No one doubts a mother's mental state after a traumatic delivery. We just need a few doctors to sign the papers, and Rachel becomes the crazy ex-wife who is a danger to her own daughter. Victoria's voice then asked, "And what about me? What happens to me after the divorce is complete?" "You will be Emma's stepmother, of course. We will need to wait an appropriate amount of time, but Victoria, you know how this all works. Play your part correctly, and you will be compensated very well. And if Rachel tries to fight back?" Marcus laughed. "With what? I have already paid off her lawyer. I am dealing with the private detective. And once she is institutionalized for a psychiatric evaluation, nobody will believe a word she says." The recording continued for many hours. Rachel and Amber listened to it all, forming a clear picture of a systematic takedown that was much more than a simple affair. Marcus had been planning to dispose of Rachel even before Emma was conceived. The pregnancy merely gave him a useful schedule. That evening, Tyler and Diane came to the small apartment. "Let me understand this," Tyler said, walking around the limited living space. "The woman who helped ruin my sister's life is now our greatest asset?" "She is our only asset," Rachel answered, "and she has proof that might actually let us win this." "How was this proof obtained?" Diane asked, crossing her arms. "By secretly taping conversations that might not be allowed in a courtroom." "It does not have to be allowed," Amber stated. "It just has to be made public." Marcus's entire business is founded on his image as a brilliant young tech CEO, a devoted family man, and a philanthropist. If those recordings leak, his investors will disappear, his board will desert him, and everything he has created will fall apart. "You want to take this to the media?" "I want to give Marcus a decision," Rachel declared. "The same one he gave me. Give up everything, or see your world go up in flames." Diane shook her head. "Rachel, this is too dangerous. You are talking about extorting a billionaire. I am talking about using his own methods against him." Rachel's voice was resolute. "Marcus used his money and influence to destroy me, to take my daughter, and to make me seem insane. Well, I now have the one thing he cannot afford: the truth." Tyler observed his sister's face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "What do you need us to do?" "I need your help to arrange a meeting with Marcus. Just the two of us." "That is insane," Diane protested. "He could get you arrested." "He could get me committed again." "He could," Rachel acknowledged. "But he will not. Because I am going to present him with an offer he cannot decline." The meeting was scheduled for Friday evening at a restaurant in Greenwich. It was a neutral setting, public enough to deter any trouble, but private enough for a serious discussion. Rachel showed up early. She ordered water and waited. Marcus entered at exactly 7 o'clock. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than some people's cars. His smile was self-assured, almost mocking. "Rachel," he said, taking the seat across from her, "I was surprised you wanted to see me. My attorneys advised me against it. I am certain they did. They believe you are unstable and that this meeting could be some sort of trap." Rachel smiled. "They are partially correct." Marcus's expression wavered. "What does that mean?" "It means I have spent the last month learning to play your game. And Marcus, I have become very skilled at it." She took out her phone and played a 30-second clip. It was from one of Amber's recordings. Marcus's voice filled the air between them. The postpartum psychosis angle is perfect. No one questions a mother's mental health after a traumatic birth. Marcus's face turned white. Where did you get that? Does it matter? Rachel maintained a conversational, almost cheerful tone. The fact is that I possess 12 hours of recordings exactly like that one. You and Victoria scheming to ruin me. You admitting to fraud. You discussing how to bribe people. That is illegally obtained evidence. It is not admissible. Maybe not in a court of law. Rachel leaned forward. But it would be very interesting for your investors, your board members, and the reporters who write those glowing articles about the brilliant young CEO with the perfect life. You are bluffing. Am I? Rachel took out a printed email. This is a message from Sarah Chen at the Wall Street Journal. She has been investigating scandals in the tech industry. I have given her an exclusive story. Marcus stared at the document, his confidence visibly failing. What do you want? Rachel detailed her conditions. Full and uncontested custody of Emma. The prenup is canceled. $50 million, which is less than what you have hidden in those offshore accounts. And Marcus, this is the most important condition. You will never contact me or my daughter ever again. No visitation, no telephone calls, absolutely nothing. That is absurd. It is the cost of protecting your reputation. Rachel stood up. You have until Monday at noon to decide. If I do not have signed documents by then, those recordings will be released to the world. She walked out of the restaurant without a backward glance. Her hands were shaking so much she could barely hold her car keys, but she hid it until she was safely in the parking lot. Then she called Diane. It is done. Now we wait. Monday morning came with gray skies and a cold rain that seemed to reflect Rachel's mood. Sleep had been impossible since her confrontation with Marcus. Every time her eyes shut, his face was there. That flicker of lost confidence. The cold math in his eyes as he calculated his next move. She knew she had backed him into a wall, and a trapped animal is always the most dangerous. At 11:45, her phone vibrated. A text from a number she did not recognize read, "Documents signed. On their way to your lawyer now." Rachel's breath caught. She had provided Marcus with the name David Stone, a lawyer Evelyn swore was completely incorruptible. Could this nightmare finally be ending? She dialed David's number instantly. Mr. Stone, this is Rachel Bennett. Did anything arrive from my husband? Yes, they just came in. David's tone was guarded. Mrs. Bennett, this paperwork grants you every single thing you demanded. Full custody, the prenuptial agreement is nullified, and a $50 million settlement. Tears began to roll down Rachel's cheeks, so he caved. He really did it. It certainly looks that way, David said. But Mrs. Bennett, I want you to hear me clearly. I have been an attorney for 30 years, and powerful men like Marcus simply do not give up this completely. What are you trying to tell me? I am telling you to be vigilant. Go over every line in these papers before your signature touches them. And please, be careful. That night, Rachel went to Diane's apartment for what should have been a celebration. Diane popped a bottle of champagne, Tyler brought pizza, and even Amber showed up, looking nervous but relieved. To you getting your life back, Diane toasted, lifting her flute. And to Emma, Tyler chimed in, who finally gets her mom back full time. Rachel tried to smile, but a knot of dread was tightening in her stomach. It was all too perfect, too simple. Marcus Bennett never surrendered anything, especially not $50 million, without a brutal fight. What was the catch? The answer arrived at 9:17 with a loud, aggressive banging on Diane's door. NYPD, open up! Diane's face lost all its color. What on earth? Tyler stood up, positioning himself in front of the door. "Do you have a warrant?" Tyler demanded. "We do. Open this door now, or we will take it down." They had no choice. 3 uniformed cops stormed in, led by a detective, with weary, seen-it-all eyes. "Rachel Morrison Bennett?" the detective asked, flashing his badge. "You are under arrest for the crimes of wire fraud and extortion." The room spun around Rachel. "What that? We have proof you tried to blackmail Marcus Bennett with recordings you obtained illegally. We also know you conspired with Amber Jenkins to steal funds from Bennett Technologies." "That is ridiculous. I never stole anything." "You can tell your story to a judge," the detective said, motioning to his officers. "Cuff her." As the cold steel locked onto her wrists, Rachel's eyes found Amber. Her friend was frozen, just staring at the carpet, her face a blank mask. "You," Rachel whispered, the word barely audible. "You did this to me." Amber's gaze lifted, her eyes filled with tears. "I am so sorry, Rachel. He went after my family. He threatened my mom and my little sister. I had no other choice." "The recordings are real," Amber stammered, "but he edited them. He sliced out everything that incriminated him and twisted the rest to make you sound like the villain." The last bit of hope inside Rachel turned to dust. She had put her faith in Amber, believing they were in this together. She thought, for one brief moment, that she had won. But Marcus was always playing a different game, miles ahead of her. The officers pulled her from the apartment. She could hear Diane yelling at the detective and Tyler shouting about getting a lawyer, but their words dissolved into noise as she was forced into a squad car. Through the rear window, she saw Amber framed in the doorway. Just before the car sped off, Amber mouthed 2 words: "I am sorry." The cell at the Manhattan Detention Center was frigid, painted a soul-crushing gray, and smelled of hopelessness. Rachel collapsed onto a steel bench, burying her face in her hands. How had it all collapsed so completely? She was so near the finish line. The papers were signed. She had custody. Her daughter was safe. Now she faced federal charges that could lock her away for decades. Around 2 in the morning, a guard unlocked her cell. "Bennett, you have got a visitor." Rachel followed him down a hall to a small meeting room, assuming it would be David or Diane. But the person waiting for her was a complete stranger. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair, impeccably dressed, even under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Mrs. Bennett," the woman began, her voice calm, "my name is Margaret Bennett. I am Marcus's mother." Rachel felt a cold shock. "Marcus told me his mother was dead." "He says that to everyone," Margaret replied without bitterness. "It is simpler than admitting she wants nothing to do with him." She indicated the empty chair. "Please sit down. Our time is short." "Why are you here?" Rachel asked. "Because my son has turned into a monster," Margaret said, her eyes firm. "And I will not stand by while he ruins the life of another woman." Rachel slowly took the seat, her thoughts racing. "Another woman?" "Marcus's first wife, Elizabeth," Margaret explained. "She was killed in a car crash 8 years ago. Or, that is the story everyone was told." "And what is the real story?" "The real story," Margaret said, "is that Elizabeth was trying to leave him. She had proof of his cheating, the financial crimes, and the abuse. She was going to take their son and just vanish." Margaret's voice was filled with an old sadness. She died just 2 weeks before the divorce went through. A single car crash on a wet, slippery road, with no witnesses. "You believe Marcus was responsible? I believe my son will do anything to protect his kingdom. And Rachel," she leaned in closer, "I believe you are in much more danger than you think. But I am in jail right now, facing federal charges. Those charges will be dropped, Margaret said. That is not Marcus's real goal. The arrest is only a smokescreen, a way to keep you contained while he moves forward with his actual plan. And Amber Jenkins? She was never on Marcus's payroll. She worked for me. Margaret slid a thick folder across the table. I have been collecting proof against my son for years, waiting for the right time to stop him. And Rachel, that time is now. The federal charges against Rachel were dismissed 72 hours after her arrest. The official story was a lack of evidence. The real reason was much more involved. Margaret Bennett had dedicated 20 years to building a case against her son. It contained financial records, witness accounts, and proof of bribery, fraud, and even worse things. This evidence was untouchable, hidden in places Marcus never knew about, and now she was finally prepared to reveal it. I do not get it, Rachel said. She sat in David Stone's office with Margaret, Tyler, and Diane. Why now? Why are you helping me? Because you are the first one who was strong enough to survive him, Margaret answered. Elizabeth just gave up when things became difficult. The other women took the settlement and signed secrecy agreements. But you would not give up the fight, even when it took everything from you. She could have let Marcus ruin me. She could have, but there is something you need to know about my son. Margaret's tone became firm. He must achieve a total and complete victory. He never leaves an enemy standing. If you had accepted the money and gone away, he might have left you alone. But you challenged him, you threatened him, and now he will not rest until you are gone. So, what is our plan? We take him down first. The strategy Margaret described was brilliant in its simplicity. Marcus's power was built on his public persona, his image as a smart, ethical businessman who made his fortune with new ideas and effort. That image was completely false. Bennett Technologies was built with stolen ideas, partnerships made through bribes, and rivals who were crushed by illegal methods. At the heart of it all was Marcus, a man who had never followed the rules for even one day of his life. I have the papers, Margaret said. Patents that were taken from small inventors, contracts secured through blackmail, and financial reports proving years of fraud. Then why did you not use them sooner? Because I was scared. Margaret's voice broke just a little. Marcus has power and money I could never fight against. If I had made a move against him and lost, he would have destroyed me, and then nobody would have been left to stop him. What changed your mind? You did? Margaret said plainly. You showed me that fighting back is possible, that the justice system can help if you are brave enough to stand up. The press event was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, right in front of the federal courthouse in Manhattan. Margaret stood at a podium with her lawyers on each side facing a crowd of reporters. Behind her, giant screens showed the proof she had spent 2 decades gathering. Rachel watched from a coffee shop nearby, with Emma finally back in her arms. The custody arrangement had been thrown out 3 days before, with the judge pointing to strong evidence of fraud in the first case. Rachel wept for a full hour when they put her daughter in her arms. Now she watched Margaret methodically tear down her own son's empire. My son, Marcus Bennett, has spent 20 years creating a false image of respectability, Margaret stated, her voice unwavering. That image ends today. The evidence appeared on the screens. Stolen patents, forged agreements, payments to government officials. The proof of fraud was so complete that no attorney on earth could make it go away. I would also like to announce, Margaret went on, that I am providing federal prosecutors with evidence related to the death of Elizabeth Bennett, my former daughter-in-law. This evidence indicates her death was not accidental. The reporters burst out with questions, cameras flashed, and somewhere in Greenwich, Marcus Bennett's entire world fell apart. Marcus was arrested later that day at JFK Airport as he tried to get on a private flight to a country that would not send him back. The clip of him being led away in handcuffs was on every news broadcast for days. The brilliant tech innovator, the dedicated family man, the generous philanthropist, was reduced to just another fugitive running from the law. Rachel saw the reports from Diane's apartment, with Emma sleeping soundly on her lap. "How does it feel?" Tyler asked. Rachel considered it. She had imagined she would feel victorious, satisfied, maybe even joyful, watching the man who made her life hell finally fall. Instead, she just felt hollow, weary, and strangely mournful. "I feel like I just want it to be done," she said at last. "I want to stop having Marcus Bennett on my mind every single second. I want to create a life that he is not a part of. So go do that," Diane told her. "Accept the settlement, take your daughter, and go build a wonderful life." The divorce was official 6 weeks later. Rachel got full custody of Emma, the prenuptial agreement was canceled because of fraud, and she received a settlement of $120 million. It was more money than she could use in 10 lifetimes. But more importantly, she got her freedom. On a bright April morning, Rachel placed the last box in a moving truck outside of Diane's building. She was relocating to Vermont, to a farmhouse with a large yard for Emma to play in. It was a small town where nobody would know or be bothered by the fact that she was once married to a billionaire. "Are you sure about this?" Tyler asked. "You could remain in the city and be close to your family." Rachel smiled. "I need a clean slate, a place where Rachel Bennett is gone. It will just be Rachel Morrison and her daughter." Diane hugged her tightly. "You have to visit and call, and you must send photos of Emma all the time, I promise." Rachel got into her car, with Emma fastened in her car seat, and drove away from the city that had almost ruined her. In the rearview mirror, the Manhattan skyline became smaller and smaller until it vanished completely. In front of her was a road she hadn't taken before, which led to a future she could not yet imagine. And for the first time in a very long time, Rachel felt hopeful. 1 year later, Rachel Morrison stood on the porch of her farmhouse in Vermont as the sun set behind the mountains. Emma was 2 now, toddling across the lawn on her steady legs, chasing fireflies that blinked like tiny stars. Her laughter carried across the yard, so pure and full of joy, with no hint of the darkness that had defined her first few months. Rachel had kept her word to Diane. She called each week, sent pictures daily, and drove to New York twice a year so Emma could be with her aunt and uncle. But Vermont was her home now. She worked as an English teacher part-time at the local high school. The kids knew her as Mrs. Morrison, the teacher who always had a moment to listen, who championed second chances, and who seemed to know what it was like for the world to be against you. They didn't know about the billionaire, the betrayal, or the fight to survive. They only knew she was nice. Tyler came to visit every couple of months, driving up from New York, with Diane squeezed into his truck's passenger seat. "You know," Diane said, as she watched Emma run around, "you could have stayed rich in the city, with nannies and housekeepers, and never had to work again." Rachel shook her head. "That was never the life I truly wanted. I just got sidetracked for a bit." She had given most of the settlement money to charities, keeping enough to live well and provide for Emma, but not so much that it would change her. The Rachel who cut out coupons, drove a sensible car, and believed in effort over extravagance. That Rachel had returned, even stronger than she was before. That evening, after Tyler and Diane were asleep in the guest room, Rachel sat on her porch with a glass of wine and a baby monitor. The night was peaceful, and the sky was full of stars you could never see in the city. In the distance, an owl hooted. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from Margaret Bennett with the subject, "Update. Rachel, I wanted to let you know that Marcus's trial is over. He was found guilty on all charges yesterday. The judge gave him 25 years with no chance of parole. I testified against my own son. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, but it was the right thing. Elizabeth deserved justice. You deserve justice. And the world deserved to know the kind of man Marcus really was. I hope you and Emma are doing well. I hope you have found the peace that you were denied for so long. You are stronger than you realize, Rachel. Never forget that. With respect and admiration, Margaret. Rachel read the message twice, and then she deleted it. Marcus Bennett was a chapter of her past. He didn't get any space in her present. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Rachel was at her kitchen table grading papers when she heard a knock on the door. She was not expecting company. Through the window, a delivery truck was parked in her driveway. A uniformed driver was on the porch, holding a small box. Rachel answered the door. "Can I help you?" "Package for Rachel Morrison. I just need a signature right here." She scribbled her name and accepted the box. It was incredibly light, almost like an empty envelope, with no sending address. When she opened it, she found a single photograph inside. It was a picture of a perfect beach with palm trees and turquoise water. Standing in the waves was Marcus Bennett, holding a small baby boy. She flipped it over. 4 words were scrawled in his familiar handwriting. "See you soon, Rachel." Rachel stood frozen in her kitchen, staring at the photo as her heart hammered against her ribs. Marcus was meant to be in a maximum security prison, serving a 25-year sentence with no chance of parole. But the man in that picture was undeniably him. The same face, the same entitled posture, the same cruel eyes. Her hands trembled as she dialed David Stone. "Mr. Stone, this is Rachel Morrison. I have to know, is Marcus Bennett still in prison?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Morrison, I have some very bad news." The lawyer's voice was grim. "There was an incident 3 weeks ago during a prisoner transfer. Marcus got away." "Escaped? How could he have escaped?" "He had assistance from the inside. We think this was something he had been orchestrating for months." "So where is he?" "We are not sure. He left the country, likely for a place with no extradition treaty. The FBI is on it, but honestly, with his kind of money, he could be anywhere on the planet." Rachel felt that sickening, familiar lurch, as if the floor had vanished from under her. But this time was not like the others. This time she was not isolated, was not powerless, and was not just afraid. Her gaze drifted out the window to where Emma was playing in the grass, completely carefree. Then she looked back at the picture, at the clear threat it contained. "See you soon." Marcus was trying to make her panic, to force her into hiding. He wanted her to live every day in fear, constantly checking over her shoulder. Rachel picked up her phone and made another call. "Tyler," she said as soon as her brother picked up, "I need you here in Vermont. We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "The kind that we have to face head on," Rachel replied, her voice firm. "Marcus is out, and he sent me a message. That son of a bitch. I am on my way. I will be there by tonight. Bring Diane," Rachel added. "And Tyler? Pack a big bag. You might be staying for a bit." She ended the call and went to the window. Emma was still laughing, chasing butterflies, with no idea that a dark shadow now loomed over their quiet world. Rachel watched her daughter, thinking. The woman she used to be would have packed a bag, taken Emma, and vanished. She would have spent the rest of her days running from a monster who would never give up the hunt. But that version of Rachel no longer existed. In her place stood someone who had endured betrayal, manipulation, a wrongful arrest, and the complete demolition of the life she thought she had. She was a woman who now understood that you could not outrun your problems forever. Marcus Bennett wanted to pick a fight? Fine. Rachel was ready to bring him a war. She went to her bedroom closet and retrieved a storage box she had not touched in more than a year. It held the files and proof that Margaret had provided as an insurance policy. It was all there, evidence of Marcus's other crimes, stories of other people he had ruined, and secrets he had paid fortunes to keep hidden. It was more than enough to dismantle his entire business empire, even if he never saw the inside of a cell again. It was enough to unite everyone he had ever hurt against him. Rachel brought the box to her kitchen table and started sorting through the papers. The fantasy was long dead. It died the day she lay bleeding on a marble floor, finally realizing the man she married had never loved her. But her true story was just getting started, and this time, she was going to be the one to write the ending. As the sun went down behind the Vermont mountains, brushing the sky with orange and red, Emma played inside the farmhouse, safe and happy, and Rachel began making calls to lawyers, to reporters, and to other women Marcus had wronged, building an alliance, a plan, a fortress, to protect her daughter forever. This is what mothers do. They fight, they survive, and they never surrender. Rachel watched her daughter, memorizing the fading light in her dark hair, the sound of her musical laugh, her tiny hands reaching for the dancing fireflies. "I will keep you safe," Rachel whispered, "no matter the cost." Then she returned to her work. The fight for their future was just beginning, and Rachel Morrison was ready. Her story proves a truth that the powerful want you to forget. Integrity cannot be bought, hidden, or silenced by money, lawyers, or fake diagnoses. But this victory was for everyone. This story is for every woman made to feel insane for trusting her own gut. It is for every mother who fought impossible odds to shield her child and needed to see that victory is real. It is for anyone crushed by a person with more influence, needing proof that the system can work if you don't surrender. Rachel did more than save herself. She created a guide for survival. Now, this is where you can help. If her story touched you, hit the like button right now. Your click signals that these stories are important, that truth is important, and that women who fight back deserve to be heard. Post a comment below and tell me what moment struck you the most. Was it the fire you saw when Rachel slammed on the glass? The betrayal from someone she trusted? Was it the instant she finally stood up and said it was over? Your comments build a community, a safe space where survivors can connect and where people, in their own struggles, can see they are not by themselves. Share this video with one person who needs to see it, not because they are in Rachel's exact situation, but because understanding is power. The more people who know how manipulation works, the harder it is for predators to win. If you have not subscribed, please join our family now. Hit subscribe and turn on your notifications, because next week we are sharing another story that will challenge your beliefs about trust, betrayal, and the cost of fighting for what is right. Remember this: you are stronger than those who try to break you. You are smarter than those who dismiss you, and you are braver than you realize. Until next time, continue to fight for your truth. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.